Professor Lindenbrock was a respected scientist. His neighbors knew that he was a great mind, but that he was also quiet, moody, and had a bad temper. Lindenbrock had a nephew who often helped with his experiments. His name was Axel, and he especially liked working with minerals. When the day's work was done, Axel could only think of one thing. Robin, the professor's funny young neighbor.
Ammonite. Macarodoncine.
One fine day, Professor Lindenbrock bought an old book that was considered to be very important for the quality of its investigations. When he opened it, something fell out. A secret message written on old parchment. They would have to put together all the parts of the puzzle to figure out what it said. Professor Lindenbrock studied the strange code on the parchment day after day, barely eating or sleeping until he discovered that the message was actually a map that showed how to travel to the center of the Earth. Excitedly, Lindenbrock went to tell the children, and the professor asked his nephew Axel if he would like to accompany him on the grand adventure. During the long trip, Lindenbrock and Axel traveled by horse carriage, train, and boat. After many days on the road, they finally arrived to their destination, the Sneffels Peninsula of Iceland. Waiting for the duo in Iceland was Hans, a tall and strong explorer who would accompany them on their trip. The next morning, the three intrepid explorers started out towards Sneffels. It was a long and perilous journey. During the trek, the men arrived to the peak of a volcano and found 3 passages. In order to know which would take them to the center of the Earth, they had to wait until the break of dawn and let the sunlight illuminate the way. Axel, Hans, and Professor Lindenbrock descended into the volcano through a deep cavern. It took several days to reach firm ground. They found a place to rest, and the professor took out many instruments with which he analyzed the interior of the crater.
Thermometer. Compass.
They walked and walked for days through the cavernous and beautiful underground galleries. Axel, distracted by the beauty surrounding him, took a different path than his mates and found himself completely lost. When he opened his eyes, Axel was on an enormous beach, illuminated by a light that was like the sun. But how could it be possible? Light in the depths of the Earth? Thankfully, Hans and Lindenbrock didn't take long to find the boy. After recovering, Axel explored the beach with his uncle until he found an even more beautiful place. A forest with giant mushrooms and fungi. Meanwhile, Hans built a raft to cross the sea so that the men could continue exploring once Axel and the professor returned from their expedition. Although they traveled many days without seeing land, the trip was exciting. The explorers came upon many sorts of marine wildlife that appeared to be from prehistoric times. Finally, Axel, Hans, and the professor arrived to dry land. They got out of the boat to look for wood so that they could make a fire, when suddenly, they discovered a herd of wild elephants. And the elephants were being bossed around by a giant. Scared to death, the three friends ran towards a cave for protection. But once they were inside, they discovered that the door was blocked by giant boulders. They decided to demolish the wall with gunpowder. The explosion caused a large crack in the earth, through which seawater began to rush into, flooding the cave. Suddenly, the water began to boil and rivers of lava ran down the sides of the cave. The explorers were inside a volcano that was about to erupt. Many hours later, the trio woke up on the slope of a volcano, and Professor Lindenbrock recognized it at once. They were on the island of Stromboli of Italy. Axel, Hans, and Professor Lindenbrock had journeyed thousands of miles below the Earth. They had overcome every sort of obstacle, discovered new species, and, best of all, they had survived. It had been a great adventure,